Chapter 14. God spoke to Moses. These are the instructions for the infected person at the time of his cleansing. First, bring him to the priest. The priest will take him outside the camp and make an examination. If the infected person has been healed of the serious skin disease, the priest will order 2 live clean birds, some cedar wood, scarlet thread, and hyssop to be brought for the one to be cleansed. The priest will order him to kill one of the birds over fresh water in a clay pot. The priest will then take the live bird with the cedar wood, the scarlet thread, and the hyssop, and dip them in the blood of the dead bird over fresh water, and then sprinkle the person being cleansed from the serious skin disease 7 times and pronounce him clean. Finally, he will release the live bird in the open field. The cleansed person, after washing his clothes, shaving off all his hair, and bathing with water, is clean. Afterwards, he may again enter the camp, but he has to live outside his tent for 7 days. On the 7th day, he must shave off all his hair, from his head, beard, eyebrows, all of it. He then must wash his clothes and bathe all over with water. He will be clean. The next day, the 8th day, he will bring 2 lambs without defect and a yearling ewe without defect, along with roughly 6 quarts of fine flour mixed with oil. The priest who pronounces him clean will place him and the materials for his offerings in the presence of God at the entrance to the tent of meeting. The priest will take one of the lambs and present it and the pint of oil as a compensation offering and lift them up as a wave offering before God. He will slaughter the lamb in the place where the absolution offering and the whole burnt offering are slaughtered, in the holy place, because like the absolution offering, the compensation offering belongs to the priest. It is most holy. The priest will now take some of the blood of the compensation offering and put it on the right earlobe of the man being cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. Following that, he will take some oil and pour it into the palm of his left hand, and then with the finger of his right hand sprinkle oil 7 times before God. The priest will put some of the remaining oil on the right earlobe of the one being cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, placing it on top of the blood of the compensation offering. He will put the rest of the oil on the head of the man being cleansed and make atonement for him before God. Finally, the priest will sacrifice the absolution offering and make atonement for the one to be cleansed from his uncleanness, slaughter the whole burnt offering, and offer it with the grain offering on the altar. He has made atonement for him. He is clean. If he is poor and cannot afford these offerings, he will bring 1 male lamb as a compensation offering to be offered as a wave offering to make atonement for him, and with it a couple of quarts of fine flour mixed with oil for a grain offering, a pint of oil, and 2 doves or pigeons which he can afford, one for an absolution offering and the other for a whole burnt offering. On the 8th day, he will bring them to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting before the presence of God. The priest will take the lamb for the compensation offering, together with the pint of oil, and wave them before God as a wave offering. He will slaughter the lamb for the compensation offering, take some of its blood, and put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. The priest will pour some of the oil into the palm of his left hand, and with his right finger sprinkle some of the oil from his palm 7 times before God. He will put some of the oil that is in his palm on the same places he put the blood of the compensation offering, on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. The priest will take what is left of the oil in his palm and put it on the head of the one to be cleansed, making atonement for him before God. At the last, he will sacrifice the doves or pigeons which are within his means, one as an absolution offering, and the other as a whole burnt offering, along with the grain offering. Following this procedure, the priest will make atonement for the one to be cleansed before God. These are the instructions to be followed for anyone who has a serious skin disease and cannot afford the regular offerings for his cleansing. God spoke to Moses and Aaron. When you enter the land of Canaan, which I'm giving to you as a possession, and I put a serious fungus in a house in the land of your possession, the householder is to go and tell the priest, I have some kind of fungus in my house. The priest is to order the house vacated until he can come to examine the fungus, so that nothing in the house is declared unclean. When the priest comes and examines the house, if the fungus on the walls of the house has greenish or rusty swelling that appears to go deeper than the surface of the wall, the priest is to walk out the door and shut the house up for 7 days. On the 7th day, he is to come back and conduct another examination. If the fungus has spread in the walls of the house, he is to order that the stones affected by the fungus be torn out and thrown in a garbage dump outside the city. He is to make sure the entire inside of the house is scraped and the plaster that is removed be taken away to the garbage dump outside the city. Then he is to replace the stones and replaster the house. If the fungus breaks out again in the house after the stones have been torn out and the house has been scraped and plastered, the priest is to come and conduct an examination. If the fungus has spread, it is a malignant fungus. The house is unclean. The house has to be demolished. Its stones, wood, and plaster are to be removed to the garbage dump outside the city. Anyone who enters the house while it is closed up is unclean until evening. Anyone who sleeps or eats in the house must wash his clothes. But if when the priest comes and conducts his examination, he finds that the fungus has not spread after the house has been replastered, the priest is to declare that the house is clean. The fungus is cured. He then is to purify the house by taking 2 birds, some cedar wood, scarlet thread, and hyssop. He will slaughter 1 bird over fresh water in a clay pot. Then he will take the cedar wood, the hyssop, the scarlet thread, and the living bird, dip them in the blood of the killed bird and the fresh water, and sprinkle the house 7 times, cleansing the house with the blood of the bird, the fresh water, the living bird, the cedar wood, the hyssop, and the scarlet thread. Last of all, he will let the living bird loose outside the city in the open field. He has made atonement for the house. The house is clean. These are the procedures to be followed for every kind of serious skin disease or itch, for mildew or fungus on clothing or in a house, and for a swelling or blister or shiny spot, in order to determine when it is unclean and when it is clean. These are the procedures regarding infectious skin diseases and mildew and fungus. Chapter 17. Holy living, sacrifices, and blood. God spoke to Moses. Speak to Aaron and his sons and all the Israelites. Tell them, this is what God commands. Any and every man who slaughters an ox or lamb or goat inside or outside the camp, instead of bringing it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to offer it to God in front of the dwelling of God, that man is considered guilty of bloodshed. He has shed blood and must be cut off from his people. This is so the Israelites will bring to God the sacrifices that they're in the habit of sacrificing out in the open fields. They must bring them to God and the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting and sacrifice them as peace offerings to God. The priest will splash the blood on the altar of God at the entrance to the tent of meeting and burn the fat as a pleasing fragrance to God. They must no longer offer their sacrifices to goat demons, a kind of religious orgy. This is a perpetual decree down through the generations. Tell them, any Israelite or foreigner living among them who offers a whole burnt offering or peace offering, but doesn't bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to sacrifice it to God, that person must be cut off from his people. If any Israelite or foreigner living among them eats blood, I will disown that person and cut him off from his people, for the life of an animal is in the blood. I have provided the blood for you to make atonement for your lives on the altar. It is the blood, the life, that makes atonement. That's why I tell the people of Israel, don't eat blood. The same goes for the foreigner who lives among you. Don't eat blood. Any and every Israelite, this also goes for the foreigners, who hunts down an animal or bird that is edible, must bleed it and cover the blood with dirt, because the life of every animal is its blood. The blood is its life. That's why I tell the Israelites, don't eat the blood of any animal, because the life of every animal is its blood. Anyone who eats the blood must be cut off. Anyone, whether native or foreigner, who eats from an animal that is found dead or mauled must wash his clothes and bathe in water. He remains unclean until evening and is then clean. If he doesn't wash or bathe his body, he'll be held responsible for his actions. Chapter 15. Bodily Discharges. God spoke to Moses and Aaron. Speak to the people of Israel. Tell them, when a man has a discharge from his genitals, the discharge is unclean. Whether it comes from a seepage or an obstruction, he is unclean. He is unclean all the days his body has a seepage or an obstruction. Every bed on which he lies is ritually unclean. Everything on which he sits is unclean. If someone touches his bed, or sits on anything he sat on, or touches the man with the discharge, he has to wash his clothes and bathe in water. He remains unclean until evening. If the man with the discharge spits on someone who is clean, that person has to wash his clothes and bathe in water. He remains unclean until evening. Every saddle on which the man with the discharge rides is unclean. Whoever touches anything that has been under him becomes unclean until evening. Anyone who carries such an object must wash his clothes and bathe with water. He remains unclean until evening. If the one with the discharge touches someone without first rinsing his hands with water, the one touched must wash his clothes and bathe with water. He remains unclean until evening. If a pottery container is touched by someone with a discharge, you must break it. A wooden article is to be rinsed in water. When a person with a discharge is cleansed from it, he is to count off 7 days for his cleansing, wash his clothes, and bathe in running water. Then he is clean. On the 8th day, he is to take 2 doves or 2 pigeons and come before God at the entrance of the tent of meeting and give them to the priest. The priest then offers one as an absolution offering and one as a whole burnt offering and makes atonement for him in the presence of God because of his discharge. When a man has an emission of semen, he must bathe his entire body in water. He remains unclean until evening. Every piece of clothing and everything made of leather which gets semen on it must be washed with water. It remains unclean until evening. When a man sleeps with a woman and has an emission of semen, both are to wash in water. They remain unclean until evening. When a woman has a discharge of blood, the impurity of her menstrual period lasts 7 days. Anyone who touches her is unclean until evening. Everything on which she lies or sits during her period is unclean. Anyone who touches her bed or anything on which she sits must wash his clothes and bathe in water. He remains unclean until evening. If a man sleeps with her and her menstrual blood gets on him, he is unclean for 7 days, and every bed on which he lies becomes unclean. If a woman has a discharge of blood for many days, but not at the time of her monthly period, or has a discharge that continues beyond the time of her period, she is unclean, the same as during the time of her period. Every bed on which she lies during the time of the discharge, and everything on which she sits becomes unclean, the same as in her monthly period. Anyone who touches these things becomes unclean, and must wash his clothes and bathe in water. He remains unclean until evening. When she is cleansed from her discharge, she is to count off 7 days. Then she is clean. On the 8th day, she is to take 2 doves and 2 pigeons, and bring them to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting. The priest will offer one for an absolution offering, and the other for a whole burnt offering. The priest will make atonement for her in the presence of God because of the discharge that made her unclean. You are responsible for keeping the people of Israel separate from that which makes them ritually unclean, lest they die in their unclean condition by defiling my dwelling, which is among them. These are the procedures to follow for a man with a discharge or an emission of semen that makes him unclean, and for a woman in her menstrual period. Any man or woman with a discharge, and also for a man who sleeps with a woman who is unclean. Chapter 18. Sex. God spoke to Moses. Speak to the people of Israel. Tell them, I am God, your God. Don't live like the people of Egypt where you used to live, and don't live like the people of Canaan where I'm bringing you. Don't do what they do. Obey my laws and live by my decrees. I am your God. Keep my decrees and laws. The person who obeys them lives by them. I am God. Don't have sex with a close relative. I am God. Don't violate your father by having sex with your mother. She is your mother. Don't have sex with her. Don't have sex with your father's wife. That violates your father. Don't have sex with your sister, whether she's your father's daughter or your mother's, whether she was born in the same house or elsewhere. Don't have sex with your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter. That would violate your own body. Don't have sex with the daughter of your father's wife born to your father. She's your sister. Don't have sex with your father's sister. She is your aunt, closely related to your father. Don't have sex with your mother's sister. She is your aunt, closely related to your mother. Don't violate your father's brother, your uncle, by having sex with his wife. She is your aunt. Don't have sex with your daughter-in-law. She is your son's wife. Don't have sex with her. Don't have sex with your brother's wife. That would violate your brother. Don't have sex with both a woman and her daughter. And don't have sex with her granddaughters either. They are her close relatives. That is wicked. Don't marry your wife's sister as a rival wife and have sex with her while your wife is living. Don't have sex with a woman during the time of her menstrual period when she is unclean. Don't have sex with your neighbor's wife and violate yourself by her. Don't give any of your children to be burned in sacrifice to the god Moloch, an act of sheer blasphemy of your God. I am God. Don't have sex with a man as one does with a woman. That is abhorrent. Don't have sex with an animal and violate yourself by it. A woman must not have sex with an animal. That is perverse. Don't pollute yourself in any of these ways. This is how the nations became polluted, the ones that I'm going to drive out of the land before you. Even the land itself became polluted, and I punished it for its iniquities. The land vomited up its inhabitants. You must keep my decrees and laws, natives and foreigners both. You must not do any of these abhorrent things. The people who lived in this land before you arrived did all these things and polluted the land. And if you pollute it, the land will vomit you up just as it vomited up the nations that preceded you. Those who do any of these abhorrent things will be cut off from their people. Keep to what I tell you. Don't engage in any of the abhorrent acts that were practiced before you came. Don't pollute yourselves with them. I am God, your God. Chapter 19. I am God, your God. God spoke to Moses. Speak to the congregation of Israel. Tell them, be holy, because I, God, your God, am holy. Every one of you must respect his mother and father. Keep my Sabbaths. I am God, your God. Don't take up with no God idols. Don't make gods of cast metal. I am God, your God. When you sacrifice a peace offering to God, do it as you've been taught so it is acceptable. Eat it on the day you sacrifice it and the day following. Whatever is left until the third day is to be burned up. If it is eaten on the third day, it is polluted meat and not acceptable. Whoever eats it will be held responsible because he has violated what is holy to God. That person will be cut off from his people. When you harvest your land, don't harvest right up to the edges of your field or gather the gleanings from the harvest. Don't strip your vineyard bare or go back and pick up the fallen grapes. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am God, your God. Don't steal. Don't lie. Don't deceive anyone. Don't swear falsely using my name, violating the name of your God. I am God. Don't exploit your friend or rob him. Don't hold back the wages of a hired hand overnight. Don't curse the deaf. Don't put a stumbling block in front of the blind. Fear your God. I am God. Don't pervert justice. Don't show favoritism to either the poor or the great. Judge on the basis of what is right. Don't spread gossip and rumors. Don't just stand by when your neighbor's life is in danger. I am God. Don't secretly hate your neighbor. If you have something against him, get it out into the open. Otherwise, you are an accomplice in his guilt. Don't seek revenge or carry a grudge against any of your people. Love your neighbor as yourself. I am God. Keep my decrees. Don't mate two different kinds of animals. Don't plant your fields with two kinds of seed. Don't wear clothes woven of two kinds of material. If a man has sex with a slave girl who is engaged to another man but has not yet been ransomed or given her freedom, there must be an investigation. But they aren't to be put to death because she wasn't free. The man must bring a compensation offering to God at the entrance to the tent of meeting, a ram of compensation. The priest will perform the ritual of atonement for him before God with the ram of compensation for the sin he has committed. Then he will stand forgiven of the sin he committed. When you enter the land and plant any kind of fruit tree, don't eat the fruit for 3 years. Consider it inedible. By the 4th year, its fruit is holy, an offering of praise to God. Beginning in the 5th year, you can eat its fruit. You'll have richer harvests this way. I am God, your God. Don't eat meat with blood in it. Don't practice divination or sorcery. Don't cut the hair on the sides of your head or trim your beard. Don't gash your bodies on behalf of the dead. Don't tattoo yourselves. I am God. Don't violate your daughter by making her a whore. The whole country would soon become a brothel filled with sordid sex. Keep my Sabbaths and revere my sanctuary. I am God. Don't dabble in the occult or traffic with mediums. You'll pollute your souls. I am God, your God. Show respect to the aged. Honor the presence of an elder. Fear your God. I am God. When a foreigner lives with you in your land, don't take advantage of him. Treat the foreigner the same as a native. Love him like one of your own. Remember that you were once foreigners in Egypt. I am God, your God. Don't cheat when measuring length, weight, or quantity. Use honest scales and weights and measures. I am God, your God. I brought you out of Egypt. Keep all my decrees and all my laws. Yes, do them. I am God. Chapter 20. God spoke to Moses. Tell the Israelites, each and every Israelite and foreigner in Israel who gives his child to the god Moloch must be put to death. The community must kill him by stoning. I will resolutely reject that man and cut him off from his people. By giving his child to the god Moloch, he has polluted my sanctuary and desecrated my holy name. If the people of the land look the other way, as if nothing had happened when that man gives his child to the god Moloch and failed to kill him, I will resolutely reject that man and his family, and him and all who join him in prostituting themselves in the rituals of the god Moloch. I will cut off from their people. I will resolutely reject persons who dabble in the occult or traffic with mediums, prostituting themselves in their practices. I will cut them off from their people. Set yourselves apart for a holy life. Live a holy life, because I am God, your God. Do what I tell you. Live the way I tell you. I am the God who makes you holy. Any and every person who curses his father or mother must be put to death. By cursing his father or mother, he is responsible for his own death. If a man commits adultery with another man's wife, the wife, say, of his neighbor, both the man and the woman, the adulterer and the adulteress, must be put to death. If a man has sex with his father's wife, he has violated his father. Both the man and woman must be put to death. They are responsible for their own death. If a man has sex with his daughter-in-law, both of them must be put to death. What they have done is perverse, and they are responsible for their own deaths. If a man has sex with a man as one does with a woman, both of them have done what is abhorrent. They must be put to death. They are responsible for their own deaths. If a man marries both a woman and her mother, that's wicked. All three of them must be burned at the stake, purging the wickedness from the community. If a man has sex with an animal, he must be put to death, and you must kill the animal. If a woman has sex with an animal, you must kill both the woman and the animal. They must be put to death, and they are responsible for their deaths. If a man marries his sister, the daughter of either his father or mother, and they have sex, that's a disgrace. They must be publicly cut off from their people. He has violated his sister and will be held responsible. If a man sleeps with a woman during her period and has sex with her, he has uncovered her fountain. She has revealed her fountain. Both of them must be cut off from their people. Don't have sex with your aunt on either your mother's or father's side. That violates a close relative. Both of you are held responsible. If a man has sex with his aunt, he has dishonored his uncle. They will be held responsible and die childless. If a man marries his brother's wife, it's a defilement. He has shamed his brother. They will be childless. Do what I tell you. All my decrees and laws, live by them, so the land where I'm bringing you won't vomit you out. You simply must not live like the nations I'm driving out for you. They did all these things, and I hated every minute of it. I've told you, remember, that you will possess their land that I'm giving to you as an inheritance, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am God, your God, who has distinguished you from the nations. So live like. Distinguish between ritually clean and unclean animals and birds. Don't pollute yourselves with any animal or bird or crawling thing which I have marked out is unclean for you. Live holy lives before me, because I, God, am holy. I have distinguished you from the nations to be my very own. A man or woman who is a medium or sorcerer among you must be put to death. You must kill them by stoning. They're responsible for their own deaths. Chapter 21. Holy Priests. God spoke to Moses. Speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron. Tell them, a priest must not ritually contaminate himself by touching the dead, except for close relatives, mother, father, son, daughter, brother, or an unmarried sister who is dependent on him since she has no husband. For these he may make himself ritually unclean, but he must not contaminate himself with the dead who are only related to him by marriage, and thus profane himself. Priests must not shave their heads or trim their beards or gash their bodies. They must be holy to their God and must not profane the name of their God. Because their job is to present the gifts of God, the food of their God, they are to be holy. Because a priest is holy to his God, he must not marry a woman who has been a harlot or a cult prostitute or a divorced woman. Make sure he is holy because he serves the food of your God. Treat him as holy because I, God, who make you holy, am holy. If a priest's daughter defiles herself in prostitution, she disgraces her father. She must be burned at the stake. The high priest, the one among his brothers who has received the anointing oil poured on his head and been ordained to wear the priestly vestments, must not let his hair go wild and tangled, nor wear ragged or torn clothes. He must not enter a room where there is a dead body. He must not ritually contaminate himself, even for his father or mother, and he must neither abandon nor desecrate the sanctuary of his God, because of the dedication of the anointing oil which is upon him. I am God. He is to marry a young virgin, not a widow, not a divorcee, not a cult prostitute. He is only to marry a virgin from his own people. He must not defile his descendants among his people, because I am God who makes him holy. God spoke to Moses. Tell Aaron, none of your descendants in any generation to come who has a defect of any kind may present as an offering the food of his God. That means anyone who is blind or lame, disfigured or deformed, crippled in foot or hand, hunchbacked or dwarfed, who has anything wrong with his eyes, who has running sores or damaged testicles. No descendant of Aaron the priest who has any defect is to offer gifts to God. He has a defect and so must not offer the food of his God. He may eat the food of his God, both the most holy and the holy, but because of his defect, he must not go near the curtain or approach the altar. It would desecrate my sanctuary. I am God who makes them holy. Moses delivered this message to Aaron, his sons, and to all the people of Israel. Chapter 22. God spoke to Moses. Tell Aaron and his sons to treat the holy offerings that the Israelites consecrate to me with reverence, so they won't desecrate my holy name. I am God. Tell them, from now on, if any of your descendants approaches in a state of ritual uncleanness the holy offerings that the Israelites consecrate to God, he will be cut off from my presence. I am God. Each and every one of Aaron's descendants who has an infectious skin disease or a discharge may not eat any of the holy offerings until he is clean. Also, if he touches anything defiled by a corpse, or has an emission of semen, or is contaminated by touching a crawling creature, or touches a person who is contaminated for whatever reason, a person who touches any such thing will be ritually unclean until evening and may not eat any of the holy offerings unless he is washed well with water. After the sun goes down, he is clean and may go ahead and eat the holy offerings. They are his food. But he must not contaminate himself by eating anything found dead or torn by wild animals. I am God. The priests must observe my instructions, lest they become guilty and die by treating the offerings with irreverence. I am God who makes them holy. No layperson may eat anything set apart as holy, nor may a priest's guest or his hired hand eat anything holy. But if a priest buys a slave, the slave may eat of it. Also, the slaves born in his house may eat his food. If a priest's daughter marries a layperson, she may no longer eat from the holy contributions. But if the priest's daughter is widowed or divorced and without children and returns to her father's household as before, she may eat of her father's food, but no layperson may eat of it. If anyone eats from a holy offering accidentally, he must give back the holy offering to the priest and add 20% to it. The priests must not treat with irreverence the holy offerings of the Israelites that they contribute to God, lest they desecrate themselves and make themselves guilty when they eat the holy offerings. I am God who makes them holy. God spoke to Moses. Tell Aaron and his sons and all the people of Israel, each and every one of you, whether native born or foreigner, who presents a whole burnt offering to God to fulfill a vow or as a free will offering, must make sure that it is a male without defect from cattle, sheep, or goats for it to be acceptable. Don't try slipping in some creature that has a defect. It won't be accepted. Whenever anyone brings an offering from cattle or sheep as a peace offering to God to fulfill a vow or as a free will offering, it has to be perfect, without defect, to be acceptable. Don't try giving God an animal that is blind, crippled, mutilated, an animal with running sores, a rash, or mange. Don't place any of these on the altar as a gift to God. You may, though, offer an ox or sheep as deformed or stunted as a free will offering, but it is not acceptable in fulfilling a vow. Don't offer to God an animal with bruised, crushed, torn, or cut off testicles. Don't do this in your own land, but don't accept them from foreigners and present them as food for your God either. Because of deformities and defects, they will not be acceptable. God spoke to Moses. When a calf or lamb or goat is born, it is to stay with its mother for 7 days. After the 8th day, it is acceptable as an offering, a gift to God. Don't slaughter both a cow or ewe and its young on the same day. When you sacrifice a thanksgiving offering to God, do it right so it will be acceptable. Eat it on the same day. Don't leave any leftovers until morning. I am God. Do what I tell you. Live what I tell you. I am God. Don't desecrate my holy name. I insist on being treated with holy reverence among the people of Israel. I am God who makes you holy and brought you out of Egypt to be your God. I am God. Chapter 23. The Feasts. God spoke to Moses. Tell the people of Israel, these are my appointed feasts, the appointed feasts of God, which you are to decree as sacred assemblies. Work 6 days. The seventh day is a Sabbath, a day of total and complete rest, a sacred assembly. Don't do any work. Wherever you live, it is a Sabbath to God. These are the appointed feasts of God, the sacred assemblies which you are to announce at the times set for them. God's Passover, beginning at sundown on the 14th day of the first month. God's Feast of Unraised Bread, on the 15th day of this same month. You are to eat unraised bread for 7 days. Hold a sacred assembly on the first day. Don't do any regular work. Offer fire gifts to God for 7 days. On the 7th day, hold a sacred assembly. Don't do any regular work. God spoke to Moses. Tell the people of Israel, when you arrive at the land that I am giving you and reap its harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf of the first grain that you harvest. He will wave the sheaf before God for acceptance on your behalf. On the morning after Sabbath, the priest will wave it. On the same day that you wave the sheaf, offer a year-old male lamb without defect for a whole burnt offering to God, and with it the grain offering of 4 quarts of fine flour mixed with oil, a fire gift to God, a pleasing fragrance, and also a drink offering of a quart of wine. Don't eat any bread or roasted or fresh grain until you have presented this offering to your God. This is a perpetual decree for all your generations to come, wherever you live. Count 7 full weeks from the morning after the Sabbath, when you brought the sheaf as a wave offering, 50 days until the morning of the 7th Sabbath. Then present a new grain offering to God. Bring from wherever you are living 2 loaves of bread made from 4 quarts of fine flour and baked with yeast as a wave offering of the first ripe grain to God. In addition to the bread, offer 7 yearling male lambs without defect, plus 1 bull and 2 rams. They will be a whole burnt offering to God, together with their grain offerings and drink offerings, offered as fire gifts, a pleasing fragrance to God. Offer 1 male goat for an absolution offering and 2 yearling lambs for a peace offering. The priest will wave the 2 lambs before God as a wave offering, together with the bread of the first ripe grain. They are sacred offerings to God for the priest. Proclaim the day as a sacred assembly. Don't do any ordinary work. It is a perpetual decree wherever you live down through your generations. When you reap the harvest of your land, don't reap the corners of your field or gather the gleanings. Leave them for the poor and the foreigners. I am God, your God. God said to Moses, tell the people of Israel, on the first day of the 7th month, set aside a day of rest, a sacred assembly. Mark it with loud blasts on the ram's horn. Don't do any ordinary work. Offer a fire gift to God. God said to Moses, the 10th day of the 7th month is the Day of Atonement. Hold a sacred assembly, fast, and offer a fire gift to God. Don't work on that day because it is a day of atonement to make atonement for you before your God. Anyone who doesn't fast on that day must be cut off from his people. I will destroy from among his people anyone who works on that day. Don't do any work that day. None. This is a perpetual decree for all the generations to come, wherever you happen to be living. It is a Sabbath of complete and total rest, a fast day. Observe your Sabbath from the evening of the 9th day of the month until the following evening. God said to Moses, tell the people of Israel, God's Feast of Booths begins on the 15th day of the 7th month. It lasts 7 days. The first day is a sacred assembly. Don't do any ordinary work. Offer fire gifts to God for 7 days. On the 8th day, hold a sacred assembly and offer a gift to God. It is a solemn convocation. Don't do any ordinary work. These are the appointed feasts of God, which you will decree as sacred assemblies for presenting fire gifts to God. The whole burnt offerings, grain offerings, sacrifices, and drink offerings assigned to each day. These are in addition to offerings for God's Sabbaths and also in addition to other gifts connected with whatever you have vowed and all the free will offerings you give to God. So, summing up, On the 15th day of the 7th month, after you have brought your crops in from your fields, celebrate the feast of God for 7 days. The first day is a complete rest, and the 8th day is a complete rest. On the first day, pick the best fruit from the best trees. Take fronds of palm trees and branches of leafy trees, and from willows by the brook, and celebrate in the presence of your God for 7 days. Yes, for 7 full days. Celebrate it as a festival to God. Every year from now on, celebrate it in the 7th month. Live in booths for 7 days. Every son and daughter of Israel is to move into booths so that your descendants will know that I made the people of Israel live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am God, your God. Moses posted the calendar for the annual appointed feasts of God, which Israel was to celebrate. Chapter 24. Light and Bread. God spoke to Moses. Order the people of Israel to bring you virgin olive oil for light, so that the lamps may be kept burning continually. Aaron is in charge of keeping these lamps burning in front of the curtain that screens the testimony in the tent of meeting from evening to morning continually before God. This is a perpetual decree down through the generations. Aaron is responsible for keeping the lamps burning continually on the lampstand of pure gold before God. Take fine flour and bake 12 loaves of bread, using about 4 quarts of flour to a loaf. Arranged in 2 rows of 6 each on the table of pure gold before God. Along each row, spread pure incense, marking the bread as a memorial. It is a gift to God. Regularly, every Sabbath, this bread is to be set before God, a perpetual covenantal response from Israel. The bread then goes to Aaron and his sons, who are to eat it in a holy place. It is their most holy share from the gifts to God. This is a perpetual decree. One day, the son of an Israelite mother and an Egyptian father went out among the Israelites. A fight broke out in the camp between him and an Israelite. The son of the Israelite woman blasphemed the name of God and cursed. They brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shilemeth, daughter of Dibri of the tribe of Dan. They put him in custody, waiting for God's will to be revealed to them. Then God spoke to Moses. Take the blasphemer outside the camp. Have all those who heard him place their hands on his head. Then have the entire congregation stone him. Then tell the Israelites, anyone who curses God will be held accountable. Anyone who blasphemes the name of God must be put to death. The entire congregation must stone him. It makes no difference whether he is a foreigner or a native. If he blasphemes the name, he will be put to death. Anyone who hits and kills a fellow human must be put to death. Anyone who kills someone's animal must make it good, a life for a life. Anyone who injures his neighbor will get back the same as he gave, fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. What he did to hurt that person will be done to him. Anyone who hits and kills an animal must make it good, but whoever hits and kills a fellow human will be put to death. And no double standards. The same rule goes for foreigners and natives. I am God, your God. Moses then spoke to the people of Israel. They brought the blasphemer outside the camp and stoned him. The people of Israel followed the orders God had given Moses.